All right, hello everyone. Welcome. Thank you all so much for coming to the Albany Civic Theater. So today we are here with a very special guest, Stephen Peros, who flew in all the way from, where are you flying in from?
Los Angeles.
So a bit of a flight. So before we get started, brief introduction. Hello, my name is Casper Oliver. I use he, they pronouns. I am the head of Thesperience Productions, which is a local grassroots queer organization for art and activism. And we were very, very lucky to be able to actually help promote this run of Carlavoy on social media. And I was very honored when Jillian asked me to come and be part of this as well. So enough about me. Let's get to our guest here. So please introduce yourself to your lovely fans here.
Hello, I am Stephen Peros. I am a storyteller. I write, I've written and been produced and published as a playwright, as a screenwriter. I've written for television, both features, and I've sold pilots, and most recently foray into writing graphic novels and comics, and now the newest thing that I've never done before is a stage musical. I'm turning my play, The Cat's Meow, into a musical, which will be announced fairly. We've just made a deal with a composer. I interviewed a whole bunch of composers, and that process has begun. So there's 3/4 of a libretto, and on its way to the finish line.
So we have a lot of stuff, obviously, that we can discuss here, but we only have an hour, so we're going to be kind of just touching on the basics of a lot of things. So first, let's start with kind of, I think, a very fitting question, all things considered, Carlavoy. I would love to know kind of what was your inspiration for telling this story and telling it in the way that you did?
Well, I've loved Hollywood history. I love old Hollywood. It's a fascinating place. It was when you go back to the teens or 20s, it was almost like the last, outlaw town. It was whenever there was a crime or a problem, the first people on the scene was not the police. It was the studio heads, and they fixed everything. A lot of secrets. There's a lot that fascinates me personally about identity. That's what, whether it's the flickering image is not what you see, and then everything else beyond that is still not what you see. People pretending to be something they're not, people hiding what they really are. And so it's always fascinated me. And I went to Los Angeles after I graduated NYU. I was out there because a script of mine had been optioned. I was like, oh my God, I took 2 years out of school and I made it, I did the big time. They were going to make this movie. It was the producers of The Doors, the Val Kilmer, The Doors, Oliver Stone. And then it turned out they started casting, and then it turned out it wasn't even, whoever was financing it wasn't worth the piece of paper it was written on it. So that whole thing fell through. Then other things happened, then someone else wanted, and I started getting exposed to this world of, oh no, you just always hustling to tell a story, but you never get to tell a story when you're in the film industry. And so I just knew I had to tell a story. And I had this play, Carlavoy, I was working on. I had, so in '92, so I'd been in LA 2 years, and when you're in your 20s, every month feels like a year. It's very impatient. I can't believe it hasn't happened yet. And so a friend of mine, he actually is the impetus. He wanted to do a staged reading. He directed it. That got a theater interested to partner and kind of cut us a deal. And then my friend sort of went off and was doing other things, and then I wound up raising the money and directing it, and it was very primal. I would literally come in, because they had an acting class during the day, we had to clear the stage every Sunday. So then I would come in Thursday, I foolishly did an 8-week Thursday to Sunday run, with no money for press, PR. And so I'd come in every night, I'd roll this carpet out, very similar to what you guys did. And then we had stuff, we had a big long curtain, and we had stuff tucked there, and we set it all up. And then I raised all the money, got people to sign, and they gave me money, and I directed it, and then I stayed up in the booth. It was a 47-seat theater, and I stayed up in the booth and ran the soundboard, and then the last person left, rolled up the carpet. This was all very, and I said, I know I loved doing this, and I know I never want to do it again. So to just come, show up in a gaudy red Mustang and just sit there and just, wow, good, it's Jillian's problem. It's all her. It's just really quite a heady experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's inspired by, I just really was fascinated, by this whole idea of when I was first at NYU. I think I even had the first inklings of it probably while I was still a student, 88, 89, I was probably thinking about it. I had this idea of it being it was always going to be this psychological, and literal ghost story. I think the tagline on our poster was "A haunted mansion, a haunted mind," and so yeah, and I knew it would be fictitious. I didn't want to research one specific situation of feared marriage and try to do that story, because I wanted the creative license with it. And then we did it in '94, and it got good reaction. What was really interesting for me, as I told some people last night, is I thought the version that you all are doing here is, as the text says, that in an earlier version it was produced in 1994, because in 2014, no, in 2010, when Samuel French published it, I had the opportunity to submit the version, and I made some changes, and just my craft had gotten better, and I just changed some things, and but even that's 14 years old, so I wasn't sure how this was going to play, but it just feels in some ways even more relevant and prescient about what's going on in terms of gender identities and sexual identities, and being pigeonholed or not, and particularly what Tony says registered with me, and Harold's confusion, because Harold, there's a lot of lack of self-love of Harold. Harold has a lot of self-hate disguised as bravado, and I just think so much of that is relevant to the discussion, particularly about the people who I was talking to last night, who have that experience themselves. So it was very gratifying to be here. I thought I was going to be cringing, and for me, not about the production, cringing about me and my work, and I wasn't. So I was pleased with how it was all delivered here. So yeah, that was the need to tell a story was what made me launch Karlovoy, and it was going to be a film. Back when my movie The Cat's Meow came out, it was a film about a murder on William Randolph Hearst's yacht. That, even though it's the other play of mine that's published by Samuel French, was actually, it started as a screenplay. That's the script that brought me to Los Angeles, and then it didn't get made for 10 years. Different producers, one producer has it and they have a stroke, and then another producer has it and they go out of business, but then they won't release it for all this stuff, but it just wouldn't die. People just kept wanting to do it. And then I said, I just need to tell this story. Maybe I'll turn it into a stage play. And I met someone who had the financing to do it as a stage play. You have to be creative with how you're going to get, a lot of people in the creative arts, they wait for other people to make things happen for them. Like, I've done enough. You haven't. You have to do more. And what happened with The Cat's Meow, I was in a theater, watching a theater on La Brea in Hollywood, and someone was doing a play, and someone I knew, former fiance of a dear friend of mine, and she had dyed her hair really blonde, and she was doing a 20s play. It was an adaptation of La Ronde, and I knew she had Oklahoma oil money, and I said, Kim, I said, you know my script, which at that time was called Everybody Charleston. I said, I think I'd be willing to turn it into a stage play and just give you the role of Marion if you can put the money together to do it. And she said, okay. And I just think of that gesture, like of actually thinking like a producer in that moment, or just trying to get something done. So we did the play in '97. It wound up doing what I wanted. It reinvigorated interest in the screenplay. Peter Bogdanovich directed it. So in '99 we were on a set. No, 2000. It was the Dangling Chad election. We were in Germany. I was in Berlin while that whole election was going on, the Al Gore election, and we were And it got, you know, the film got made. And now, something I never expected, suddenly I have a play that's been produced in 7 countries, which was never part of the plan, you know. So, all because I sat in the theater and you know, one of those sliding doors moments where I said, no, I'm going to talk to her and see if she wants to do this. So I teach as well, film and TV writing to producing majors. And I tell them, you know, you have to be proactive and not be so narrow and think, what else can I do with this story? Even the graphic novel I'm selling in the lobbies, it started its life as a screenplay, a feature screenplay. Got me a lot of interest, got me a job off of someone reading it. And, but no one was making it. And so someone said to me, well, maybe you should turn it into some other form of IP. And it's about Bram's 20-something screw-up named H.G. Wells, who meets a grumpy 40-something theater manager named Bram Stoker, which is who they both were in 1893. And now the two men go on a fictitious adventure that winds up leading to the creative inspiration for both writers' first great work, Dracula and the Time Machine. And so people say, well, if only there was some IP. I said, Dracula and the Time Machine isn't big enough IP? I said, it's free. So, but some other form of IP. I said, oh, here we go again, like the cat's meow, I gotta turn it into something else. All right, it's not really gonna be a stage play, it would be really expensive, crazy stage play. But maybe I'll turn it into a graphic novel. And I surrounded myself by people who knew what they were doing so I could rise to their level. And now I'm developing it not as a movie, but as a series for streamers with the former president of Marvel Studios. All because I said, you know, oh, instead of just saying, oh darn, my screenplay didn't sell, oh well. Said, okay, well what else? How else can I tell the story? And now more than ever, people have to start thinking across all sorts of mediums. How can, I mean, podcasts, whatever. You know, what else can I do with this that I'm trying to get made, try to get out there? Because you never know where it's going to lead. So, it's a really long answer to how did Karlovoy come about.
I told him before this interview, I was like, ramble as long as you want. The more you talk, the easier my job is. So.
In our email, I said, don't worry, I said, just drop a nickel in me and it keeps going.
And that's why I said yes. So, no, so the people here have either seen Karlovoy or are hopefully soon going to see Karlovoy. But I don't know if any of us have heard about the Cat's Meow. So you very briefly touched on what that's about, but could we get just a little more information on what that play's about?
Yeah, when I was 18 years old and I was sitting in a history of silent film class with one of the legendary historians, William K. Everson. He was this British guy, always came to the jacket and tie and he was bald, and he would screen his own personal silent film prints on 16 millimeter, and they were double sprocket, which means there was no sound, so there was no music or anything. But he would sit in the back with one of those old, you know, turntables that you only get from like the AV section at a school, and he had his albums. He was back there like a little DJ. So, oh, the romantic scene. Oh, now the adventure scene, and he would play. So he was showing this short comedian Charlie Chase, and he said, "Oh, this was produced and directed by Thomas, and of course you all know how he died." And the bunch of 18-year-olds, we had no idea who he was, let alone how he died. And he said, "Oh, he was murdered on the Hearst yacht. Charlie Chaplin was there, and Willa Parsons. It was all hushed up, but you could read about it. It's out there." And it just stuck in my head. And then, about a year or two out of NYU, I started wanting to write the next spec screenplay to see if I can get an agent, and I just couldn't let go of this idea, and there was no internet for me to quickly look up anything. I was at the library, one of those places, and did research, and so it was just fascinating the crossroads all these interesting people were for 2 days in their life. So rather than, I like biopics that don't necessarily run a cradle to grave race through someone's life, but you kind of get a glimpse of them through one chapter. So the more I started reading up on all these people, not only what was written about them, but written by them, their autobiographies. You know, there are no two stories that are the same about what happened on that yacht. There's an old joke that if as many people were on the Oneida that were rumored to be that weekend, the ship would have sunk. So there is no clear, because Hearst did such an effective job. He had the kind of power no one had before or since because of how much more technology has come in. He controlled newspapers in literally every city in America. He'd just gotten the president elected, largely responsible because of his support. So he very effectively got any suspicion about what happened on his yacht squashed. Got DAs in San Diego and Los Angeles to both go, he can investigate. That's right, you investigate. No, you investigate. Anyway, neither of us are going to investigate. So it was it was just a fascinating story to research and write. Because whenever you do something ensemble, and as you all know from watching movies or watching a play, you don't ever want the audience to say, oh, now it's the part where on that character, I'm not as interested in that one. So how do you make something where you're following, 4 or 5 major characters who all see themselves as, who all, are, that it's about. So the film, we were able to get an amazing cast. We had a lot of great people. The cast that got us the movie greenlit is not at all the cast that made the movie, because then when we did it, no one could do it for this reason or that. When it was Drew Barrymore was going to be Marion Davies. It was Christopher Plummer was going to be Hearst. I think, not Vanessa Redgrave, Lynn Redgrave was going to be Eleanor Glynn, who Joanna Lumley wound up playing. Rosie O'Donnell was going to be Luella Parsons, and then she couldn't because of her show. But in a way, and then Matthew Broderick was going to play Ince, but then the people he had just made a deal with were very angry, and he had to go and do his rehearsals for a little Broadway show called The Producers. But we wound up getting, in the end, all the wrong people got out of the way so the right people could do the movie. The only reason I could watch the film again is, and not go, I have to hear my lines again, I'm going to kill myself, is this cast. And also Peter Bogdanovich did such a wonderful job directing it and making me be a part of it when it was made. So I'm much more patient now, finally, in life, because I tell people, don't worry about these disappointments. I mean, yes, I was crushed in 1990 and 91, 92, and oh my gosh, the movie was not going to get made now, and all this stuff fell through. And then I did get made 10 years later with a better director, a better cast. My script had evolved thanks to doing it as a play. So it's all about the journey, it's worth the journey. It's why I came up here. It's like this Carl Boy, this little play that won't say no, and I'm so happy it's touched this theater company, because you guys have done a tremendous job. But so far, those are really the only 2 major Hollywood-based things. I did do a script on Rita Hayworth, who was born Margarita Carmen Cancino, and that's also about identity again. How the studio took this. She's American-born, but Spanish descent, half Spanish. Dancer, and kind of transformed her, and with painful electrolysis back then to raise her hairline, turn her hair red, make her be look like the all-American girl with the fiery Latin spirit, So it's just it's endlessly fascinating to me how Hollywood, how both the people who control it try to shape, and how people gravitate towards it who are trying to reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
And how that all comes together. It can be a perfect dramatic storm and fodder for storytelling.
Yeah. And I do appreciate how wide of a range your creations kind of go. Again, you have plays, you have graphic novels, and we've talked a lot about the kind of themes that you work with, identity and exploration. But another thing that I think would be interesting to talk about is the different genres that you've dabbled in.
Yeah.
Because just before this, you and I got to talking about your experience with horror and your love of horror. And none of what we've touched on yet has been horror per se. So I would love to kind of just pick your brain on what do you like about playing with these different genres, like sci-fi for the graphic novel and kind of historical fiction for Carla Boy, and because you have a range.
I mean, to me, I admire the Alfred Hitchcocks and the people who kind of stay in one arena. People who've done nothing but musicals and so forth. Woody Allen and comedy and generally very grounded contemporary stories for the most part. But for me, I always like to go to do something different the next thing. And I'm a lover of film and theater, and I'm never the person who says, I don't want to go see it because I don't like well, I don't like action films, or I don't like romantic comedies. Right? I like all genres done well.
Yeah.
And I don't have any issues with the genre. Like restaurants, which cuisine do you hate? I love all cuisines if they're done well. You know, I think most people's reasons why they say they hate Thai food, or Chinese food, or Japanese food is they've had lousy versions of those cuisines. So, to me, I just love telling stories, and if I'm and since I love cinema being the first love, and my first love in cinema was horror and sci-fi. If you were to see my DVD and Blu-ray collection, and I have a lot of original posters and lobby cards, all sorts of things. It's predominantly horror sci-fi of 50s, 60s, 70s, and would be the 30s, 40s, except that's really expensive. Because that's when people threw stuff out, and that's why it's so rare to get stuff. So I didn't really write anything horror sci-fi for the longest time until I finally just had an idea that went, because I also, as a teacher, you see all these people come in, these students come in who are fans of the genre, and then they just write a generic copy of something they love instead of something fresh. So I always was waiting for fresh things, fresh ideas to come before I'm going to dive into it. I am become a sort of a historian of it, and I wound up getting drafted through odd circumstances into editing and writing chapters for a book called Giant Beast Cinema, which was a #1 on Amazon for horror movie books when it debuted, and which I'm also selling copies of, and working on a second book in that arena as well. So I'm writing that. I'm doing a stage musical. I'm working on a TV series, trying to get an independent film of Carla Boy actually off the ground. So yeah, I just like getting involved in different kinds of projects.
Sound like you never get bored.
Well, yeah, you know what? It's a good question. I don't really good thing to consider. No, I'm not. I'm always amazed when people say they're bored. I mean, you can be bored at an experience. You can be bored at a movie you're watching, or if you're stuck in something you don't want to be in. But then it's also on you. Then you make it interesting.
Yeah.
You know? It's your life. Whatever this experience you're going through, you're in it. You're a part of it. Even if what's going to solve it is leaving, just get out of it.
Yeah. And artistic brains can think of really creative solutions. So it's if you just let yourself.
Yeah.
But you've mentioned kind of starting up this musical. I'm curious about the differences. I mean, besides the obvious, of kind of having a stage play for, like this kind of play versus a musical. So what have some of the differences in procedure, in your creative process?
The first round was going from for the Cats round was going from screenplay to stage play, and that's when you realize, little furtive glances that characters do while at a dinner table for 12 people, that's not going to really work on stage. And so I had to, otherwise it's just going to play for the people in the first row. So I had to rethink that for the needs of the stage. How do you pull attention and so forth that doesn't require a close-up or a subtle look. Now, part of the inspiration to do it as a musical was that a lot of productions, because people were doing big scene changes, cabins and this and that, and they would use people dressed as servants on the ship to do that, and they would play music. They would use either 20s music. There was one production that actually had a big stage, double-decker set, big theater, 500-seat theater, and they had as if Hearst had a jazz band, which he did in the movie he did, and so they had a band, little three-piece chanteuse and two musicians, and so they would sort of play through scene changes and act breaks and stuff, and so people were always on their own adding music to it. And then I started thinking about the tradition of there's a musical of Titanic that was very successful, and Grand Hotel, this idea of this one opulent set, 20s, very glamorous. Everybody's got secrets, everybody's got agendas, those are the things people sing, and I just thought this would make a musical. So now it's about how much music does the song replace a scene? Does the song bring out a scene? But I am doing some, because it's all historical fiction. The Cat's Meow. I did a lot of research, but in the end, you have to just kind of figure out what happened on this boat. You could research Charlie Chaplin and Marion Davies till you're blue in the face, but in the end, they walk in a cabin, they close the door, and now you're a dramatist. There's no recording of that. One of the things that has come out since I made the film and the play has been published is that Hearst and Davies had a love child, and that love child would have been that was raised as Marion's niece. So she went off to Europe, had a baby, and that baby was agreed that her sister would raise it as her own, and she always had a special relationship with her niece. And this was actually effectively kept secret, and it really wasn't until she died, the niece died in the early 2000s, that on her deathbed told people there's evidence, this and that, all sorts of things. And so I said, well, if Marion and Hearst had a 2 or 3 year old, I forget the age at the time of that ship, and she's dealing with what she's dealing with, and Chaplin's dealing with that he was deciding he had just gotten his 15-year-old leading actress in The Gold Rush pregnant. I was like, Marion's dealing with a lot of stuff, and I can't, now that I know it, I can't unknow it, and so the musical is actually going to, this character's not going to be in there, but the pain of it will be in there. And whether one character's going to be trying to use it as blackmail or not, I don't know, but as a secret that they're going to keep. But I want to bring it in because it's certainly part of the themes of the piece. What will we sacrifice, for what we perceive as our success?
Right.
What will we, for love, for a number of things. And so that's something new. I'm also shifting the dynamic of the character Jennifer Tilly played, who was the columnist Luella Parsons in both the play and movie. She's the person who witnesses this crime. And then she's off, and then she comes back. And I thought, well, why am I taking her off? I think I'm going to do something different in the musical. I'm going to make her not having to recover, and they give her a sedative, and then she comes out and she's going to have her way with hers. Like, no, I'm going to have her in the whole time. And so I'm rethinking some things of the final beats of the final scenes. So it's fun to have that freedom with your own work, because I just don't want it to be a copy and paste the entire script and just slug in some songs. I want it to be its own thing. So yeah.
I mean, like, a lot of people will say and agree that if you're going to do either a remake or like when you're kind of redoing a story, retelling it, that it isn't going to be a very effective retelling if it's just exactly the same as it was the first time. So something that's like, why retell it? Why?
Yeah.
So it is really interesting to hear about how these changes come to be as you're working on the script.
Yeah, I feel like people are never people never seem to anybody have a good reason why that shouldn't be a remake. People are either angry that a remake changed so much, or they changed everything, and then why do they do it exactly the same? Like, well, which is it? Nobody can make it. They basically just don't want anybody to remake something. There's never any fair and I think if you're going to remake something that didn't work, and you're going to make it better. That there was something that had the potential to be great that wasn't, and how do we improve upon it rather than just try to cash in on it or do something different.
Right. I guess a remake can kind of come across different if you can tell that there was like love and passion put into the remake, where it was more of someone or a group of people had a passion or a love or an adoration for a story and wanted to retell it versus like a cash grab sort of thing. But speaking of kind of like retelling stories, I am really curious, and I've been waiting to bring up your graphic novel that you are selling out on the table. And I heard some people get pretty intrigued when he was talking about the plot. So we've talked about kind of your experience with like writing plays, writing musicals, but how is the experience of creating this graphic novel?
Well, it's for anybody who's a visual storyteller. It's a great medium because the writer, the person who's listed as there's sort of 4 component creative parts on any novel, graphic novel or comic book, and that's the writer, and then there's the artist, it's the person who draws it by pencil, then the inker, the person who inks that in, colors, whoever colors it, and then the letters, whoever puts the balloons and the captions. So the writer is essentially like the equivalent of the writer-director of a movie. You not only write the script, but you actually say page 1 and what each panel is supposed to look like. You know, or high looking down on, you know, you're directing it. Some writers are not very as visual, so they detail the panels in collaboration with the artist. They may let the artist run with it if that's their case. But usually in the traditional sense, you're like getting to direct a $100 million film for much less. So it was really great because you know, my major was at NYU as a film and television major. So, and I made short films and I made 2 features. So it's great writing it and then seeing it come alive is like making a little mini movie. So yeah, that process, it's a different process. It's a lot about you're learning a lot about economy when you're doing it, because you know you don't have scenes that go on for the longest time. How do you tell the story in an image and dialogue within that image and a description within that image? First thing you learn when you're going from one medium to graphic novels, there's no such thing as a panel that says, you know, Stoker punches Wells and Wells flips over a table. Wait a minute, that's 3 panels you just said. There's the punch, there's the move, and then there's so you can't write motion, you know. So you have to, it's first because the editor I was working with pointed that out to me right away. And so I was like, oh, you're right, okay. So you start thinking in terms of still images and what are the best still images to do it. But it's great. Your artist is your collaborator. The artist is your director of photography, costume designer, production designer, casting director, all in one. And so it's fun to see what they come up with. Just like anybody who collaborates, you want to give people the freedom to bring you their A game. So I try not to just, and I same thing when I'm on a film set. As a director, I don't want to dictate to someone, this is the way I want you to do it, and I don't want to hear from you. You know, you brought really great, talented people into your orbit. Let them give you their best. The moment you start to make them think that all they're supposed to do is what you're telling them, then they don't bring you stuff. Yeah. You know, they don't bring you their creativity, and so that's the fun part of the graphic novels, is to just really get the A game of your artists and your colorists and all the people who you're working with.
A real collaborative piece.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun, and you know, and everyone loves the. You know, and I was an artist as a kid. The very same person who's doing my art for Stoker and Wells is someone I've known since junior high. Wow. And he and I were both artists. We were both the kids drawing, and we were pretty lateral as far as skill and talent. Except then I went more towards writing, and then filmmaking. And I think my last reel was caricatures of professors at NYU, and then I stopped. And then I didn't realize that it sort of atrophies if you don't keep it up. And then when we did the play in '97, I thought, well, I got to give a gift to everybody, but I don't have any money to buy 14 people in the cast, and then all the people backstage. Oh, I'll do a group caricature of the cast. Yeah, I'm really good at that. And then I went, God, what happened? And so I had to really work to get it back. And I wound up doing a group caricature. And I did the same thing on the set of the movie. That everybody got, and Peter got the original, and then everybody else got number 1 of, you know, I printed it in Berlin. But you know, like, oh, I wish I'd kept up my art, because then I could be writing and drawing my book. But you know, that would be take me a while to ever get the level of skill of the book that you see out there. I don't want to underestimate how much work it takes to be as good as the best people are.
Oh yeah, and also like, that's just so much more work that you're putting on your own plate, you know, because you're already writing the story,
right,
creating it. And then you have to put it, so that would be a lot of energy to put into this.
Yeah, but there are some who are. Some comic books and graphic novels are drawn and written. And in the fan world, that's, you know, it's sort of like screenwriters get angry because everyone thinks the director is the sexy person, you know, like, fine, you know, as if they invented the whole movie. And so that's where a lot of writers become directors, because they want someone to take it seriously. It was their story. And the same that happens in comics, oddly enough, that you're the writer, but everybody gravitates to the artist table. Everybody loves the artists. it's who drew it that is the exciting part. They're the ones who have fan bases and all that stuff, which is fine. This is just all part of what I want to do anyway.
Yeah.
It's just the property, but that's why it would be fun to be an artist. But I'm not about to go down that road. So
Not gonna, draw 90 pages worth
yes,
of
I mean,
like
exactly.
12 panels.
And that's part of why there are so many different people who do all those different, because I'm writing while the artist is drawing, and then as the artist draws, someone else is inking it. If one person is doing all that, and some do, and their books come out every 5 years, because that's all they're doing everything,
So, and I remember I listened into a podcast interview that you did where you mentioned that this graphic novel was crowdfunded. Is that correct?
It was, yeah. A lot of people, creators of books that were very successful for Marvel and DC and Dark Horse, all these big labels, they all been complaining for years about how much is taken out before they make anything. And they're on top of that complaining about how many notes they get and this and that and this and that. So a lot of them have put their toe in the water of Kickstarter and Indiegogo and these platforms, and they're basically going directly to the fans, and they wind up, each campaign $250,000, $500,000, and it goes right directly to the artists and the writers and the chorus and the production, and they never go back, these guys and women and everybody, all these artists. So people are using crowdfunding as a way to. And so I said, well, I'm not going to try to shop around Stoker and Wells. I don't have any track record in graphic novels, but let me take a stab at this thing called Kickstarter and this thing called Indiegogo. And we wound up raising, exceeded our goals, and now we did the same thing with the second book, which is 2 pages away from being fully drawn. So I got a page in last night to look at. So yeah, it's just a fun experience.
Yeah.
Fun experience.
I was actually just about to ask if the comic that's out there, if that graphic novel was the first, or if that's like it.
Now, it was supposed to be part of a trilogy, but then it took a long time because when I got involved with the people who were developing it as a TV show, there was, I thought, well, I think we should hold off. And then that's taking a long time. And then I went to them. I said, do you have a problem if I go on with the next book, even if it differs from the storyline that we're developing? And they didn't have any problem. They says no problem. Just then that makes there's just any awareness of Stoker and Wells is going to be positive. It's funny you asked about the crowdfunding experience. For anyone here who's done crowdfunding, it's a very intense experience because for 30 days it's the only thing in your life, and you have to remember it's not the only thing in the lives of the people you're going to. So a lot of people don't want. You have to do a lot of self-promotion, but in the end, it's very gratifying because you're always surprised by who stepped up, and I always see it as you're doing not some charity, or you're basically pre-buying. It's a pre-sale of the book, and then you're giving something else. If you at a higher level, you'll get this, you'll get original art, you'll get all these things. Someone bid for a level so that I could give them script notes on their TV pilot, and so it's ultimately really fulfills your faith in people, because you'll find there'll be some things that upset you, but you'll find somebody that you didn't know that you meant all that much to suddenly gave you more than you thought they would, and you're like, so it's a lot of gratitude through the process, and then it fascinates you because I only got 2 direct emails from anyone during the crowdfunding where someone wrote me to say that they're not going to do it. And I'm like, okay. And in both cases, they were incredibly wealthy people who I had done like 3 things for in the past. They explained to me how they just donated to this and just donated, and they really can. And I'm like, why didn't they just ignore it?
Yeah.
You took the time. And there's a level of like $25 get you the book delivered to your door. Like you're gonna spend $40 of your time writing an email to tell me how you're not. And if someone still considers me friends, they weren't writing to be saying I'm not gonna. No, it's always been very polite. And I'm like, wow. And I'm still telling the story of how terrible that was. It really worth it? for you to just ignore it. Just never do it. I would never have been upset. I know everyone's life is busy. No one's required to contribute to my crowdfunding. I remember someone I grew up with wrote me, "So sorry, Steve, I'm going through a divorce and I'm this. I hope you don't mind." I'm like, "Oh my God, of course not. Please, you don't have to." But I just couldn't believe that the only two people who wrote me were both incredibly well. Like, wow. And I'd worked with both of them.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is a strange occurrence, but you learn a lot about human nature when you do crowdfunding, I found. But in the balance, each time I've done it and I've helped other people, been a part of theirs, in the balance, it's positive. It's very positive and very rewarding, and worth it. It's one of the paths that didn't exist when I was younger, so there's so many different paths to getting things done and made and getting your work out there that that I hope young people realize they have to take advantage of, because it's like older people are, because they're like, this wasn't around when I was doing it. I'm getting involved in this. So,
Yeah. So we've talked about kind of your experience with crowdfunding, but before you kind of dipped your toe into Kickstarter and then Indiegogo afterwards, what were the processes like to get your projects funded? Oh,
everybody, had a very big Xerox bill. Everybody you had to go print your scripts with Brads. You had a lot of mailing. You had a lot of phone calls and faxes you were sending. Trying to get people to read your stuff. I tell students now, I said, you have the ability, we had to make these short films on 16mm film. They all cost us money we didn't have, and there was no outlet for them. You go, okay, well, all you could do is hope you got into a big festival, and maybe you could screen it for someone, or the VHS you made from it, to hope someone likes your work and might want you to direct a feature someday. So now you guys can make whole series and upload it to YouTube and promote the hell out of it, and who knows where you look at Issa Rae and what she did, and that's possible, it's entirely possible. But no, that was the process. Just you wrote a new spec, and you peddled your new spec script, and it didn't work. Okay, now I'm gonna write another one. You just kept at it. So.
Yeah, they say that with a lot of different artistry that you like with actors, they say you audition for a living and sometimes you get to act, right?
Right.
And I think that's very transferable to a lot of other types of art,
right?
Where you're constantly pitching and pitching and pitching, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to actually make the thing.
Yes. Well, you have to make sure that you're being productive. You're not busy. You're being productive.
Right.
I just know so many, so many people who will spend their day writing query emails, and it's a lousy email. It is a terrible email with a terrible subject line, and you're busying yourself, sending it to every agent and manager and a producer, and I don't know what else I can do. Well, there's a lot else you can do. First off, you got to write a better one. You got to figure out how you're going to connect, or is the project you're working on just not there yet? A lot of people are in a rush. You have to be patient. You don't get second trips to the well. Once someone reads or looks at your art or your work or anything and it's not up to par, that's it. You've ruined your shot with them. So like, oh my God, but that opportunity, I was at this bar and I met this person and they're the assistant to so-and-so and I told them about this pilot I'm working on. They said, get it to me. I got to send them the draft I have, right? No, you don't. Your draft is not ready. They would yes, they gave you their card or you put them in your phone. They would much rather hear from you in 3 months. And you remind them that they told you to send them the script. It wasn't ready yet. It is now. It was so appreciate that than I seized the moment and I did it and sent them a script that just wasn't there. No one else had read. Wasn't ready. You have to make sure your work is as good as it can be before you start trying to introduce it to the professional world that you're seeking. If you can't make the work yourself, whatever it is, whatever your jam is, poetry, paintings, theater, if it's not something that you can create, finance, and present on your own, that means by definition you are relying on other people. And so therefore you have to try to, how am I going to connect to the other people that I need? And that doesn't mean you have to change your work. or cater is that how do I make it as the thing I know it can be, that it's going to register to other people, because you're asking them to give you money, give you a theater, give you something to, and they have to believe it's worth it. So you have to be patient. And I find that people think, oh, I'm good enough for it to be ready now, just like the big shots. I'm like, no, the big shots know it. You have to be patient. That's how they got to be big shots.
Yeah.
Because they know great work doesn't just pop out like from the birth canal. It takes time. It's very rare that I've gotten first drafts where people go, oh my God, you nailed it. You got to be patient to get the work right, and that's what a lot of people I throughout my life I've seen, and sometimes guilty of myself. So.
Yeah. And also it requires like a lot of trust to open your art up when it's not quite ready yet. Like, you know, you'll have like pre-readers where it's like, okay, before I'm gonna send this to a publisher, like, hey, can you please read over my manuscript or whatever and tell me what you think. But of course you might just get one person that's like, wow, this is really great, and like, okay, well,
yeah,
I'm good, I'm ready.
Well, I always tell people, you have to, if you have 3 people who are really good, who give you good notes, first you always have to tell people, if it's the written word, warts and all, I want to know what you think. It doesn't help me if you just read it and stroke me and tell me what you think I want to hear. It's important that you tell me what you really think, what you think was great, what you think was boring, what you think was difficult, what you think was confusing, what you cringed at, because that's the only thing that's going to help. So I always say, you know, you're going to have people who will, but be careful of the circle of people you give it to. The people you're going to give your orange to, and you're going to ask them what they think, and they're going to tell you how they would turn it into an apple. Like, no, you want someone to look at your orange to help you make it the best orange it can be. And those people who just want to make it theirs and change it just arbitrarily to just something they like more is who you want to sort of avoid. They may be good friends of yours, but you just don't want them in that circle. But I said you're gonna have people who are, no matter what you tell them about, just give it to me, warts and all, whatever you think, they're always gonna be nice. They always are nice. And I said give them first drafts, because those are the people who, they're going to tell you when they were confused, because that's not qualitative. They're going to tell you when you put the wrong character name, like oh, thank you. A lot of people, they write something, they have 4 people they really trust, they give it to all 4. I said, don't, just give it to any 2, because you need virgin reads, you need people who haven't seen it. So you give it to the people who are easy first, and trust me, if you give it to 2 people, that first person gives you notes, they're going to catch all the dumb stuff. The very first thing you're going to do is, like 5 minutes after your conversation with that first reader, is hold on a second, you're going to grab your phone, you're going to text, don't read, I'm going to send you a new draft to the second person. You're going to already stop that person from reading, because there are a bunch of things you want to fix. And I said, and that friend of yours who's a real asshole, the one who like always finds problems with everything, never likes anything, but damn it, are they right about a few things? When they always give you something of value, that's the person you want to give it to last. Because they're the closest to what the real world is going to be like. So if you can get by them, if you've gone through a few drafts and that person's even digging it, then you're okay. Or you can deal with the things they don't like. Yeah. Then you're ready to get it out there. But it takes patience. You know, you have to. And I said, you know, and always give it to someone new. I mean, if someone who read it before said, I'll read another draft, take what they have to say with a grain of salt, because their first note is always, it's so much better than last time. And that means nothing. That's not going to mean anything when you give it to a producer or an agent. They don't know about it's better than last time or it's improved. You just need to know what is it now. So you have to be patient. And it's not about giving it to your mom or your uncle or your brother, or your girlfriend, or your boyfriend. You can, but that's not going to be, only if they're really tough. You know.
So my wife has been a English tutor for years, and so whenever I write something, even if it's like a little essay for work or whatever, I'm like, go into work mode and read this.
Yeah.
But work mode, please, because you do not sugarcoat it.
Yeah. Well, at one point I was using, because I was a script reader for William Morris for years, and so I started to know other people who had other people who were readers, and then I would pretend I was a producer and hire freelance readers, and I'd send them my scripts just with no author name on it. Because if I actually said I'm looking for feedback, they'd know that they're giving it right to the person. I want to know what a reader's going to say about my script, including if they're going to be snarky. You know, so that was helpful to give it out to professional readers without my name on it. And they just assumed I was protecting whoever the writer was. I don't
Yeah.
think anyone thought it was me, but that was a helpful tool.
Yeah, that's like a really
Mhm.
smart. I
Yeah.
hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
That's like a really good idea,
Yeah.
actually. Like that.
Mhm.
But, well, we are coming up to the
Mhm.
end of our hour, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I would love for you to kind
Mhm.
of tell these
Mhm.
fine folks, like, what you have offered at the table out there and where they can.
Yes, I meant to have them up here to hold, but it's all right. Copies of both plays, Carla Boy and The Cat's Meow, which I will sign. The graphic novel, Stoker and Wells, and my book on Giant Beast Cinema, which is out there as well, which has been award nominated. Working on another one if you like monster movies. A lot of it's from the 50s, 60s. It's a fun read. If you know a kid in your life who likes them, it's friendly. It's family friendly reading. But I know we had a question. Someone had a question. Anybody had a question?
And did anyone have
Yeah,
questions?
yes, yes.
One question, yeah, so
Mhm.
it was triggered by that you talking about making Carla Boy the movie
Mhm.
and how you can change
Mhm.
from the script. And so, for those who haven't seen it, there's a character in there who's a homophobe from the 50s, male, and he uses the term queer thing,
Mhm.
which, being older in the 90s,
Mhm.
queer thing had a much stronger
Mhm.
meaning than it did now.
Mhm.
We wouldn't say that
Mhm.
in polite company, or any company, sorry.
Mhm.
But today,
Mhm.
queer doesn't have the same negative connotation.
Mhm.
And so, is that something that you would consider changing for the movie to have it be more of what it represented in the 90s, even though it's the 50s?
That's an interesting thing because so few examples one can come up with of words that were used in a negative, derogatory fashion that has come around. It usually doesn't go that direction.
Right.
I mean, I always believe that when you're dealing with period, you want to be authentic to the period and what people would have said or would have done. But right, you want it to sting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean, there were other words that he might have said besides that. But I'd have to do I certainly don't have the word here to think of, but I would have to do
Yeah,
the research from the time to see what else someone might have said that would have been offensive.
And for those who
Yeah,
haven't seen it, I say the word.
Mhm.
And so I make sure
Mhm.
that I try to say it as disgustingly
Mhm.
as I can, that if there's a bad taste when I say it, that it's not.
Mhm.
Really punch it, because
Mhm.
it has lost its,
Mhm.
the force that it did in the
Mhm.
90s.
But in a way, I don't know that the studio boss was trying to insult. He's just uncomfortable.
Just use it right. The
Yeah,
language
he's
has
just
it, I like it.
uncomfortable, and because in the end, he wouldn't be a successful studio boss if he insulted all of his high-end. He was always trying to appease and Harold, and ultimately lie to him about that he's going to get his movie made.
Yeah.
But that's I think it's the only thing he knows what to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It was just one of those words
Yeah.
that just have
Yeah.
evolved back.
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
black now is
Mhm.
come back in
Mhm.
to be appropriate, where it
Mhm.
kind of went out for a while.
You know, I was a script reader at the time when all that was happening, and I will tell you, I was reading scripts from white authors and scripts from black authors, and the only people who were writing African American were white authors.
Mhm.
And
Oh.
most of the black authors were still writing black. I'm not going to make a blanket statement, but I just would notice that it was infrequent that a black screenwriter was writing African American, because that's also very specific.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And which is why it's sort of still something that continues to be a question mark, because everybody who's black is not African American.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Any other questions?
You know Michael's question.
Oh, yes.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, you had a question for someone else.
Yeah.
I saw a clip of Larry David where he was at an interview, and a guy was asking a question for his wife who's not there. He's like, well, where is she? Why isn't she here? You got a question for your wife? Yeah, and the guy was like, can you answer as if it's to her? And he's like, oh my God. How many more dictates do you have for me to answer this question? But what's the question you're relaying for someone else?
Yeah, you.
Yes.
I have a question. So,
So you might.
what's it like to see, I guess, you know, when you produce a play, the director has this vision. So, what's it like as a playwright to see your play produced from somebody else's vision?
Well, again, similar to a film, you know, you just have to let go. You know, unless if you are not part of the process, you know, when your play premieres, and more often than not, a playwright doesn't direct their own work. When a play premieres, you know, unlike screenplays, nobody buys your play. You know, they buy screenplays, which means they can do what they want, bring on other writers, have it rewritten.
Right, yeah.
People are essentially leasing your play. You know, they're borrowing it to you, and they need your permission to change things. So when a play is launched, usually the playwright and the producer pick the director. And now you're working with the director, and the director has to ask you, is it okay if, so you're working with them. But once it's out and it's published, and as it was here, and then the rights are through the publisher, if I've not made myself, you know, available to be a part of the process, you've got to just let go. You know, the odds that I was going to walk in here and everything was going to be exactly as I think it should be done, but also that's what fun is locking into some way you think it should be done. You know, part of what's fun was like, oh, I never even thought of that moment being done that way, and that's cool. You know, so there was a lot of that for me last night seeing the premiere. Is
Good.
things I'd never seen before that I thought was really it's refreshing. You know, it's very. I know I sat for 8 weeks, 4 performances a week, watching it being done a certain way. And my Harold was, you know, someone who'd come from the golden age of television, and he'd been on Broadway and directed by, you know, choreographed by Jerome Robbins. He was very precise, very precise. He gave the performance so exact every night that when we shot it 3 nights, this way and this way, and we cut it together. You could cut on his gestures. So precise.
You're not gonna get that with my
that's
phone.
right. No, but so again, I was long-winded to say that I saw the exact same performance, more or less. The younger actors, yeah, I would see different things,
Yeah.
and even the HM, the lead. There was one night he went there in the last act where I thought he'd gone mad. I mean, there's some in his eyes you just know he went to a place that he had held back, and but you know, essentially the same performance. So I was excited to see something different done, you know, across the board with all sorts of things. You know, I love that, you know, there's a 2-level set. I mean, just all that brought the seamlessness of it together. So yeah, it should be. I mean, otherwise writers should just stay away from the theaters if they can't deal. You know, you should start from if you start from a baseline of, wow, my story is being told to an audience, then there shouldn't be a thing of getting angry or frustrated or, you know. So, but yeah, it's a pleasure.
That's awesome.
I love that answer.
All right.
And Jillian, you
Yes,
also?
I
Yes.
did have do you
Mhm.
have a project that you think that you've done that you think of as like your favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I don't because I feel like they're all children, you know.
Yeah.
And when I've been involved, I was with a manager for over 10 years, and he would get frustrated, and we've since parted company, because I will keep telling him about a script, and 2 years later, and I think this producer, you know, I want you to write something new. Like it's you know, to me, I don't just write the script, write this work that I've labored over and gone to some place and then delivered just to exist for a month when you do an initial round for the producers and not gotten the response you wanted. Okay, now you want to move on. It's like, this is my child, it just go away. And so, and that's continued to happen to me, you know, where a project I've just, you know, there's one now that was a feature for the longest time I had and almost didn't, buried it, and then now in this new world of half-hour dramedies like Barry or Beef, or like I was like, oh, I think I could turn that feature into a series, and and no one knows it's like a script I wrote 20 years ago and been working on for 20 years. It's new, it's brand new, and people are liking it, and they're like, see, it's just, you know, so that, but, you know, I know there are ones that are not my favorite that I've written, ones that I didn't nail, and I didn't stick the landing, it's still a script that's not working, and son of a bitch. I mean, Carla Boy is certainly up there because of just how long it's been in my life, and just the recesses of where I went and where these characters go. It matters a lot to me. So yeah, but you know, so yeah, but they're all. It's like I can't make Sophie's Choice, you know. And say, take my baby. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions before we wrap up?
Sure, I'll throw one.
Mhm.
I have an intrusive thought every time I watch any play, any production. As I watch the script play out or the show play out, is when you're writing it, are you starting it chronologically? I mean, obviously every writer probably has their own process, but are you jumping into Carla Boy? Are you like, I know what this one scene in the middle of this story looks like, and I need to expand it out? Or are you starting at the end and working back, or just off
Well,
there?
each one is different. You know, what is that thing? At one point there was nothing, and then suddenly you had an idea. Where did it come from? Where did it land? And for the life of me, I can't often pinpoint where the idea came from. But sometimes you start with an image, and then a movie I did called Footprints, which is on Tubi, you can watch it. I wrote my first film I wrote and directed, and shot on Hollywood Boulevard. I just had this image of somebody wakes up face down on the handprint at dawn at the handprints and footprints of Grauman's Chinese Theater, has no idea who she is or how she got there, and doing this whole thing on the boulevard where from sunrise to sunset as she tries to piece together her life. So I just started with an image, and then I went out there and I just walked the boulevard and locations and what I thought I could get access to shoot at, and built it around there. But yeah, I mean, it isn't so much I have a scene at the no, but I always go through a process. That takes patience too, creating a real treatment for it before. I don't write my way in to something that's feature length. You could write your way into a short or a poem, but if you're going to tackle something that's going to be 2 hours of another human being's time, that takes sort of like you just don't show up to the site of a home with a truck filled with marble and nails and beams and say, I'm just going to wing this thing. You have the architect plans, and the same thing. A screenplay or a stage play should have a treatment of some kind where you're starting to plot it out, starting to understand the characters, starting to figure out your beginning, middle, and end, and the beats in between. Not that then when you write it, you're locked in, and you still are liberated with a creative process, but at least you're starting with something that there's some sort of foundation before. That's, again, but like you said, that's my process. Doesn't mean it's everybody's process. Some writer may show up and says, every single play I've ever written, I just wrote my way in, and I have 9 Tonys to show you how great a process that is. That's fine. If it worked for you, it works. You know, whatever works. There is no one size fits all. But I do see problems on the student level, and also just in movies I've seen in friends' scripts when they didn't do any planning and just wrote a draft. Like, I'd love to tell you this is working. It's not. You know, and I know exactly why it's not working. You know, there was no planning here, and an understanding of story structure and why story structure works. And not that you can't vary it, but you have to like any craft, you have to understand the rules so that you know what effect it has when you break the rule. You know, Picasso's student drawings are as perfect as any drawings you'll ever see. He has to know how to do that in order to part with it completely and create a movement. You know, so anyway, long-winded answers.
All right, we could probably take one last question if there is any, or if not, we can wrap up.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
well,
you.
thank you so much. So be sure to step by the table as you're kind of heading out through the lobby. Again, thank you all so much for coming today and supporting Stephen's work.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Albany Civic Theater for
Yes.
having this.
See the play, spread the word, buy
Yes.
the magnets and the mugs, they're awesome.
They are made by a local pottery artist.
Mhm.
So, huh?
Member of the cast.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah, she's in the
yes.
cast.
That's wonderful.
Mhm.
So definitely be sure to go check all that out in the lobby, and hope to see you back here soon to see the play itself. Thank you very much.
That sounds good.